Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 7th of March, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today is Patrick Henningsen. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Mark Anderson. Now, we're going to begin with the shenanigans in Europe with the Ukraine EU deal, or whatever it is, because apparently the EU has decided to rearm. So Ukraine's President Zelensky had the begging bowl out again yesterday when he was meeting the EU leaders at this meeting to rearm Europe. Now, prior to the meeting, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who's the former president of the European Council and a rabid anti-Russian extremist, expressed concern about the US, saying that the US has become a more demanding and complicated partner, but by strengthening our own defence, Europe can shape and reinforce transatlantic relations. He couldn't have put it better, could he?
Okay, right.
Yeah, okay, right, okay. Well, Tusk was one of the most enthusiastic proponents of EU defence union while he did work for the EU. But while he was in Brussels yesterday, aside from hugging everyone, Zelensky was begging for continued support to achieve what he was describing as a fair and lasting peace, including a truce in air and on the sea, as well as a prisoner release deal. And he was demanding that any deal should not come at the cost of giving up Ukraine. So here he is. We can see him doing the rounds, hugging everyone. When he gets to the women in the room, of course, it gets a bit more hands-on, as we'll see in a second.
He's the head of Europe. This is the new king of the EU. I mean, look at how they fet him and treat him, basically like he's walking off a super yacht as he enters the room. I mean, this guy has got incredible gravitas, Mike.
Well, the gravitas is one way to put it. I mean, even Orban did shake his hand, although no hugs from Orban.
No kisses.
There's Tusk, and then we get the hands on the hips there.
Callous by name, callous by nature.
Yeah, so he did the rounds, but unfortunately, Patrick, some people felt that this deserved. Well, there was a bit of an open mic segment.
Oh, the hot mic. Yeah, we've got the hot mic, don't we? Thanks to our friend Jose Vega in New York City. Let's cut to Jose and listen to this hot mic.
All of this is only trouble for President Zelensky and the EU as a whole.
Oh, yes, thank you for the money. Oh, thank you so much, yes. Oh, I love your money, too. Thank you so much for the European country. And thank you for the money, too. Oh, thank you. Thank you for buying my cocaine. Thank you. Thank you for buying my luxurious cars. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for the money. Thank you. Oh, Miss Meloni, I love your Italian currency money. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Oh, and thank you. Very good. Yes. Oh, my favorite best.
Vladimir, you're going to be a good boy?
Yes, I behave. Good, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, thank you for the money. Yes, thank you for the money. Yes, thank you for the money. Yes. No, I'm happy to be here. Yeah, where's my chair? Is my chair the big one? Am I in the middle?
I mean, it is a clown show, so on one hand we shouldn't be making fun of it, but on the other hand we should absolutely incessantly be making fun of it.
Yeah, it is kind of a joke. He's dressed up in his pajamas, showing up, asking for billions, wearing high-tech kids' hiking boots. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. But he commands so much in Europe these days.
Absolutely. And now, of course, he was saying he wanted some kind of ceasefire deal to deal with air and sea, which is perhaps a bit ironic because the UK has just announced a new deal to send drones to Ukraine. So it's only £30 million, which isn't much in the greater scheme of things. But the Ministry of Defence says that this is going to boost Ukraine's capabilities to tackle Russian aggression in the Black Sea. And this follows, they say, over 10,000 drones delivered to the front line so far. Well, coming back to the EU summit, Ursula von der Leyen, president of the Commission, had this to say as she was announcing 800 billion euros of spending on war, or up to 800 billion euros, I should say, because, let's listen to what she said.
First of all, I wanted to thank you, Antonio, that you convened this extraordinary EUCOM, because I think today history is being written. We are coming out of this European Council very determined to ensure Europe's security and to act with the scale, the speed and the resolve that this situation demands. We are determined to invest more, to invest better, and to invest faster together. From Paris to London to Brussels, we have shown that we are willing and able to step up our joint efforts and to coordinate effectively. Fact is that Europe is facing a clear and present danger. And this is why I presented the Rearm Europe plan today to the leaders, a plan to give Europe the military capability that it needs to face today's threats. It could mobilize up to 800 billion euros, and it is about taking more responsibility on our shoulders for our own security because the urgency is real. And therefore we agreed that with the support of the leaders, the Commission will present before the next European Council, the regular European Council in March, the detailed legal proposals.
Yeah. So, yes, as you say, before the new German government comes in.
Yeah, they have to pass it. Otherwise, it's not going to make it in Germany.
Right.
They have to ram it through before the new chancellor is sworn in.
Right. You noticed that she said there, from Paris to London to Brussels. I thought that was significant. We must remember, and I'm going to reinforce this, the idea of a European Defence Union has been driven by the UK-French axis from the beginning, from 1984 onwards. But anyway, let's have a look at what she's intending to do with this Rearm Europe business. So, first of all, they're going to allow member states to increase war spending without triggering what's called the excessive deficit procedure. This is otherwise known as a national escape clause. It suspends budget rules. It allows governments, this is the member states' governments, greater flexibility over public funding. And so, this 800 billion euro number is based on this, and it's based on this new clause releasing on average a 1.5% defence spending increase per member state. So that's what they're talking about there. Then on top of that, we've got EU loans to member states for war spending of 150 billion euros. On top of that, we have encouragement for private investment by accelerating the Savings and Investment Union. So you remember the European Union is a pan-national political and economic organisation which is made up itself of other unions. So we've got the Banking Union, you've got the Monetary Union, we've got a Savings and Investment Union. We're now building a Defence Union in the EU. And then they went on to talk about encouraging private investment through the European Investment Bank. And finally, the fifth of her things was direct more money to war-related investments using the EU budget. Now, it's not exactly clear what that means at this stage, but anyway, that in total then is supposed to create 800 billion euros over the next 4 years.
That's not counting, Mike, overruns and cost, budget overruns. It's probably going to be more like $1 trillion. So that's going to average out to, I don't know, per member state. This is all debt, Mike.
Well, and this is the point you've been making for the last number of weeks. This cannot work without the deficit spending. And you said a couple of weeks ago that it was unlikely that they would pursue that. But then what have they gone and done? They've gone and suspended their own rules to enable that deficit spending.
Yeah. You know what that means. You know what's coming. It's the big A word. And that brings us to this article in the Financial Times here. Talk about bourgeois pearl clutching. Europe must trim its welfare state to build a warfare state. This is from the Financial Times. I mean, what a crass headline and article by Janan Ganesh here, who can often be seen sipping coffee in the most expensive cafes on the Champs-Élysées. There's no way of defending the continent without cuts in social spending. This is what it's all about, Mike. It's about austerity. So pile debt on all of the EU member states, including the unofficial EU member state, which is the United Kingdom, pile debt on these countries, cut social spending in order to build up for war. I mean, this is exactly what you just showed on your previous slides, Mike. is very similar to not unlike, let's say, the economic model that was the brainchild behind the Nazi war machine, building up Nazi Germany through selected corporations and then really turbocharging the direct foreign investment, because the profits that were made during the buildup of Nazi Germany's war machine were just incredible, and everybody wanted a piece of that. It's also very much reflective of Mussolini's fascist model in Italy, and this is what's going to happen. These defense companies are going to become a central part of the new war state.
Right.
Okay. And by the way, if you put your money in defense stocks in Europe right now, you're going to make more money than putting it into gold the last couple of months. The defense stocks in Europe are through the roof. Who is putting the money in those? How many of these people in the European Parliament? Ursula von der Leyen, how much did she make off vaccines? Remember that scandal where she deleted her text messages? These people are making a heist all the way to the bank. And guess what's going to happen? Austerity, social programs. The middle class is going to get slaughtered during this period. But the elites are going to do better than ever. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, what this is really all about.
But just very briefly, let's introduce the Coven.
Ah, yes. Well, amongst the war hawks here, we're calling this the Euro Coven. Meet the tough women leaders taking on Vladimir Putin. We'll start with their Ursula von der Leyen, and you have Maia Sandu. She's the president of Moldova. Kalia Kallas, we showed her, former Estonian leader, now deputy foreign affairs person for the European Commission. Then Sanna Marin there in the bottom, she's temporarily out for the moment. And then Annalena Baerbock, Mike, who I hope you would be happy to know, Mike, that she is being recruited for the Tony Blair Institute. There's a nice position for her. And then this is the new deputy of Ursula. I think she's going to be taking over as head of the Euro Coven. This is Mette Frederiksen from Denmark. And she has turned out to be the biggest voice for war, for spending, for defeating Russia. And what these women are saying, Mike, on record is that we need to defeat Russia so that we can show that we can defeat China.
Yeah.
So what happened? You remember back in the 80s during the Cold War when everyone said, it's because the men are in charge. It's because of the men that we have all this war. If only the women were in charge, we'd have world peace. I'm afraid that's not the case.
No, and I mean, Hillary Clinton was a perfect demonstration of that.
Yeah, so this Euro Coven, backed up by an army of beta males in suits, okay? This is an absolute nightmare, and they do this every time. They'll push the women to the front to do the dirty work for the establishment, because somehow for the liberal classes, it's much more palatable. We're holding out hope that maybe Giorgia Meloni will somehow break out as the rebel amongst this coven and thwart their efforts, but we're still waiting.
Yes. Well, in the meantime, as we know, Keir Starmer announced the coalition of the willing, and one thing we didn't discuss about that is where have we heard that term before. But anyway, we'll talk about that in extra. Perhaps the question is who's going to join. Well, nobody knows exactly. What we do know is that Britain is being driven by the whole thing is being driven by Britain and France, which is, as I mentioned earlier, unsurprising since the EU Defence Union has been that British-French project from the beginning. Now, Macron said that the plan would begin with a 1 month truce between Ukraine and Russia, and that any deployment of peacekeeping troops would come only after that. He told that to Le Figaro on Sunday, but Starmer isn't quite so certain about that. Two countries which will definitely not be part of the coalition of the willing are Hungary and Slovakia, with Orban and Fico seeking to kibosh the whole thing, and maybe Meloni as well. We have to wait and see. But where does that take us? Because in the United States, in the meantime, Trump is playing his games as usual and cutting off intelligence.
Well, this is the big one, Mike. Cutting out funding is one thing because there was already billions in the pipeline, so they still have time and money and whatnot. But this is when things got really serious for Zelensky. And when you saw this story, we'll put this back up on screen here. U.S. cuts off intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Fresh blow to embattled government in Kiev as Trump administration shifts on conflict. So what exactly is going on here? I'm reading this differently, Mike. This is showing that the U.S. is dead serious about bringing the conflict to an end. It's also, I think, a safety measure from Washington, knowing that there are rogue elements within NATO rogue elements within the EU who are backing Zelensky, who in the past, whenever there's been a breakthrough, you remember, Mike, there'll be some provocation or strike of Storm Shadow missiles inside mainland Russia, or blowing up the Kerch Strait Bridge, or attacking Crimea, or sinking a Russian ship or something. So this was always done strategically by, I don't know, I can't imagine who would want to do such things, but there are privateers out there within the NATO setup. And so I think by cutting off intelligence sharing, that's the targeting, that's the reconnaissance, that's the really important part, because troop movements, all of that information, that basically allows Ukraine to do things potentially that would completely thwart and completely derail any negotiations. Because Russia's going to react anytime these attacks come. They're just going to hit back harder, and then we're back to square one again. So I think this to me is one of the strongest signals, I think, that the Trump administration can show to their allies as well as to Zelensky that they're serious.
And the US has told the UK that under no circumstances are the UK to channel US intelligence through UK systems. That is not to happen. So, if the UK decides to have a go at that, perhaps that puts Five Eyes at risk. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
But anyway, Starlink has been a key feature of the Ukraine conflict pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah, it's also a key feature of this intelligence network, Mike, because this allows for connectivity for Ukrainian forces here. Now, you probably saw a few weeks ago this story here. The U.S. could cut off Ukraine's access to Starlink internet services over the minerals deal. Okay, so this thing has developed. And of course, this brings Elon Musk right back in the frame. And just on top of this here, the reaction is, look at this, Britain and France plot to replace Musk's Starlink in Ukraine. OneWeb, we'll bring this up on screen here, OneWeb, a UK-based subsidiary of the French satellite company Eutelsat, ready to swiftly deploy new receivers to help the war effort. So this is very interesting here. And I thought there's another interesting footnote. Look at this, that in fact, Starlink satellite internet services have been a lifeline to Ukrainian soldiers and drone pilots. That's the key, drone pilots, but has been financed partly by the U.S. Department of Defense. There you go. Funding cuts potentially is dovetailing there. And then around half of the 42,000 Starlink terminals on the ground in Ukraine are paid for by Poland.
That's Donald Tusk again.
There you go. So the Polish deeply involved and deeply invested in this part of the story here. But what's also interesting here, and we'll show this too, shares in Eutelsat, which is 10% owned by the UK taxpayer, and that Dominic Cummings helped to save that project there in 2020, have risen by 200% since Friday. Wow. So if you knew this was coming,
yes, and
you could park your money there like Nancy Pelosi with some great insider trading knowledge, so that's what it is. So let me just bring us back to the Azovstal. You remember the Azovstal siege, May 2022, months into this conflict here. Now, Elon Musk has been tweeting out feverishly recently, Mike, saying, we need to get out of Ukraine. This is an unwinnable war. We shouldn't be sending Zelensky our money. Elon Musk is flip-flops by the day. Whichever way the wind's blowing, he will set his sail in that direction. But here is what Elon was up to back then. And we'll go forward here. Oh, sorry. If we take that off screen.
Yeah, go on ahead. There we go.
There we go. So this was from a testimony of the captured commander of the 36th Marine Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And basically, it turns out that the internet satellite terminals, this is back in May 2022, of Elon Musk's Starlink satellite company, were delivered to the militants of the Nazi Azov Battalion and Ukrainian Marines at Mariupol by military helicopters. According to our information, delivery of Starlink equipment was carried out by the Pentagon. Elon Musk, thus, is involved in supplying the fascist forces in Ukraine with the military. And Elon's response to this at the time on social media was to say, the word, quote, Nazi doesn't mean what he seems to think it does. That's a bit ironic coming from Elon, especially from his exploits of late here. And then when he was called out about this, this was his response. And this is very telling. He said, there are no angels in war. That's May 9th, 2022. So that's the attitude then. And then it got more interesting. This is just in November 2024. And basically, the Bulwark ran a piece accusing Elon of being Putin's stooge. So, and of course, Elon's defenders here, Alex, one of these gold lion accounts or whatever, basically saying the leftist media machine is attacking our leader, Elon. And so this was Elon's response. And you'll notice Elon does this all the time, Mike. He always pivots and panics and pivots. So here's the story there in the Bulwark, and here's Elon's response. He's basically saying, I was a major factor for why Ukraine was not overrun by Russia. Is because of Starlink. And he's basically saying Starlink is the backbone of the Ukrainian military communications at the front lines because everything else has been blown up or jammed by Russia. So he's saying because of Elon and Starlink, the war has been able to keep going. The same war Elon is now saying, oh, we need to stop this senseless war. All these poor Ukrainian men who've died on the front lines. It's so what an injustice, says Elon last week. So that's the real Elon Musk, a total opportunist. Absolutely a total opportunist, a chameleon and a political shapeshifter that is really only caring about one thing, and that's this.
Right.
So,
yeah, and of course, Mark, let's welcome you to the program. Any war situation requires rebuilding afterwards, and well, later on in the year, in a couple of months, the Ukraine Recovery Conference will be taking place.
That is correct. Good day, gentlemen. Good day, listeners and viewers. The Ukraine Recovery Conference, I'm mainly reporting this today as an announcement. It's quite a ways down the road. It's in July. But I'll look at this first item here and just cite the basic information, and there'll be more news as this gets closer. They're not releasing a lot of details right now, but what we do know is what it says here. The fourth Ukraine Recovery Conference for this year, this is the fourth year of the Recovery Conference, will take place in Rome the 10th and 11th of July, continuing the annual series of high-level political events for what they're calling the swift recovery and long-term reconstruction of Ukraine since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war of aggression, quote-unquote, against Ukraine. Governments, international organizations, financial institutions, businesses, regions, municipalities, and civil society will come together once again, united by a shared commitment, they say, to strengthen the resilience of Ukraine for as long as needed. The event is based on the Lugano principles. I'll mention briefly that in 2023, I believe the Ukraine Recovery Conference took place in London, and I did a report a little more extensive than today. Today is just an update to make sure that we show our audience that we're paying attention. And at that time, a lot of very heavy-handed financial interests were there in what looks like a ongoing long-term effort to carve up Ukraine for their own interests. Like we mentioned recently, it looks like the country's practically being put into receivership. We'll see how that pans out. Now, the Lugano principles are worth noting briefly. They stem from the Lugano, Switzerland meeting that took place. For the record, prior to Russia entering Ukraine, there were 4 meetings called the Ukraine Reform Conference. And then there have been, I believe that 2025 will be the 4th Recovery Conference. They only skipped 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. And so this has been going on since 2017, starting with reform conferences. So a lot of things have been in the pipeline for a very long time, and they just changed it to recovery once the war began. But I want to cite those principles. Those principles include partnership, reform focus, putting Ukraine on a European path, transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. You might want to put quotes around that one. Democratic participation, multi-stakeholder engagement, typical globalese language here, gender equality, inclusion. But number 7 is, of course, very notable. Rebuild Ukraine, in a sustainable manner, aligned with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and in alignment with the Paris Agreement. So they'll plug it in on a European path, but definitely in a globalist configuration. So that's a little bit of an indication of where they want to take Ukraine. But it's going to be a lot of business interests as well as government that are going to carve up and reorient Ukraine according to their globalist insights and their globalist designs. So back to you guys.
I just want to comment, Mark. The Lugano principles. So they've been working on this for many years. You said transparency, anti-corruption, failure there. Democracy, complete failure there. A Euro path, that's a dead end. And then rebuilding Ukraine, everything that needs to be rebuilt is going to be under Russian control. So the whole thing is a total wash.
Right.
What a joke.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, in the meantime, John Healey has been in the USA to meet Pete Hegseth, claiming to hail the unparalleled depth of the UK's special relationship with the US, this is a quote, the UK's closest security ally, as both nations continue to collaborate on military operations, peacekeeping, intelligence gathering, and development of advanced technologies, bolstering its security and supporting economic growth. I mean, the language that comes out of these people is it's just nonsense. But anyway, the visit also comes at the conclusion of the 50th occurrence of Exercise Red Flag in Nevada, which is a joint exercise with the United Kingdom, United States, and Australia. So that's all going on at that time. But discussions are also expected with Hegseth, also expected to cover deepening the UK-US defence relationship. But also for discussion is probably the fact that Britain has no independent nuclear deterrent, contrary to British regime claims. This is the Times here is even acknowledging this. So they're expressing perhaps an increasingly panicked view amongst defense experts that the Trump administration might withdraw access to Trident missiles. Now, the Times quotes Nicholas Drummond, who's a defense industry analyst, and he says, Drummond says he believes it's extremely unlikely Trump would cut off UK access to Trident missiles because it would be, quotes, a strategic betrayal on a grand scale that would damage him and America. But the same man also warned that Britain needed a plan B. He said that when it comes to support and maintenance, I would say that we are largely dependent on the US for parts and technical assistance. If this was withdrawn, it would also weaken our deterrent. Can you imagine a situation where Britain's relationship with America is fractured and they refuse to give us Trident missiles through the agreement that's in place? It would render the billions we've invested in Dreadnought boats useless, a terrifying thought. Anyone who suggested this a year ago, he said, would have been dismissed as an idiot. Now it's a scenario for which we need to plan. Now, the Times also reports that Britain originally bought 58 Trident missiles as part of a stockpile at Kings Bay, Georgia, which is the home base for US Ohio-class submarines. In 2008, they report there were 50 left following test firings. And of course, in recent years, the 2 test firings that have taken place failed miserably. But the Times reports that aside from those deployed, the missiles are held in a communal pool in Georgia, and the Trident missiles in service are returned to the US for periodic refurbishing. So, there is no question, therefore, that the UK actually does not have an independent nuclear deterrent. In fact, France is the only European country with that capability.
Yeah, and it was kind of amazing to see last time the British tried the Trident II D5 missile misfired off the coast of Florida last year, having trouble with the avionics. I think maybe if they can kind of go into partnership with Kim Jong-un in North Korea, who's doing very well on his missile advancements and avionics, maybe they could share intelligence and how to get that thing to work. I think it would be good for everybody.
Quite possibly. Anyway, let's move on then to Trump and NATO.
Yeah, so as you said, Mike, the meeting, the conclave in Washington, all about defense. NATO's on the rocks. A lot of rumors swirling around, Mike, that Trump's going to announce, he's dangling the sword of Damocles over Europe's neck. He's going to announce he might pull out of NATO. Watch this casual conversation from the U.S. president. Here we go.
On Peter's question, are you going to make that policy, U.S. policy, that the U.S. wouldn't defend NATO countries that don't pay?
Well, I think it's common sense, right? If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them. No, I'm not going to defend them. I got into a lot of heat when I said that. You said, oh, he's violating NATO. And, the biggest problem I have with NATO, I really, I know the guys very well. They're friends of mine. But if the United States was in trouble and we called them, we said, we got a problem, France. We got a problem, a couple of others I won't mention. Do you think they're going to come and protect us? They're supposed to. I'm not so sure. With Japan, we have a deal, which is a very interesting one. And I love Japan. We have a great relationship with Japan, but we have an interesting deal with Japan that we have to protect them, but they don't have to protect us. You know that? That's the way the deal reads. We have to protect Japan. And by the way, they make a fortune with us economically. There's another case. But we have to protect Japan, but under no circumstances do they have to protect us.
Of course, Donald's not telling the whole story there. The U.S. forbid Japan from having and building a national military after World War II because of World War II, and they did the same with Germany. So the quid pro quo is we will occupy you militarily, so you don't have to have a military yourself. So, but this is all World Wrestling Federation posturing, fake play by Trump. What he's doing here is all part of a grander negotiation. I'm sure that includes the tariff wars that are coming, as well as, look, let's face it, Mike, bankrupting the European middle class by plunging Europe into debt. So it'll blow all its money on defense. And who is the biggest defense manufacturer in the world? It's the United States of America. So they will also be profiting off of this. So I thought that was rather interesting.
But in the meantime, Starmer and Macron considering occupying Zelensky or accompanying Zelensky to the White House for his second visit because clearly he's not capable of looking after himself while he's there.
Exactly. So this is more like escorting, or shall we say, chaperoning the little green man from Kiev. He's going to need help just in case he throws a wobbler again during a press conference. He looked a little bit disheveled. Maybe he was pulling an all-nighter with Sean Penn before that meeting with Trump. We're not sure. It just didn't go well. So I don't think Macron and Starmer want to leave anything to chance next time. They're saying, don't worry, little Vola, we're going to be your escorts and make sure that you put your hand and put your pen on that paper and sign that deal.
Indeed. Okay, let's move on. If you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, support.ukcolumn.org is the place to go. There are options there. You can make a donation, join us as a member. If you do join us as a member, it gives you access to the forums and to member exclusive content. And you can pick something up from the UK Column shop or from clivedecarl.com, where we do get a small commission for anything you buy from there, so long as you use that link. But if you can't do any of that, that's fine. Please at least share the material you find and on the UK Column website in particular, and that will help us beat the censors. Now, another reminder of UK Column on location, Saturday the 5th of April 2025. Tickets going fast, as we've said. Catherine Gunn, Alex Thompson, Patrick Henningsen, Raja Mia, and Brian will be speaking. There'll also be a Q&A with the UK Column. And of course, there is a bar in the room that we're in once the event is over. So if you'd like to join us for a bit of a social afterwards, that is absolutely would be fantastic as well. So do pick up a ticket for that if you possibly can. The interview that Brian put out yesterday, A Child Snatched, is available on the UK Column website. Now, please have a look at this and the others in this series because this is something that we have been trying to pull the lid off for many, many years, and we would appreciate everybody's help in dealing with this situation. Mark, very briefly, your article on Guernsey is up on the website at the moment. You're muted, Mark. Okay, I'm afraid your audio is not working. So if you could maybe try to rejoin the connection, that would be great. So anyway, have a look at Mark's article on the tiny island that beat the bankers for 20 years of monetary freedom. And also an announcement that James Roguski will be joining us on the news program next week. So do join us next Friday for that. An announcement of the Truth Be Told march that's happening at Richmond Terrace, Whitehall, outside Downing Street. We're marking the day of reflection, but we believe reflection demands truth. So this, of course, is the 5th anniversary of the beginning of the COVID lockdowns and so on. So that's 1 p.m. Sunday, the 9th of March. As many people as possible, hopefully, will be able to join that. Are you back with us, Mark? No, he's not. Okay. Right. Okay. We will move along then. We'll come back to this story later on. And let's have a look at the situation with privacy in the UK. Now, the fight between Apple and the British government continues. The intelligence agencies have begun the process of deleting advice they used to give for people to protect their data. So here's a document from the NCSC, National Cybersecurity Centre, entitled Cybersecurity Tips for Barristers, Solicitors and Legal Professionals. This is just one example. Now, it was very clear that such people, at least as far as this document is concerned, should be using encryption to protect their data. So let's just have a look at that a bit closer. So turn on encryption, and that includes advanced data protection for iCloud, which of course is the thing which the UK government has attacked, that Apple, the service that Apple was providing. So that's that recommendation. Unfortunately, if you go to the same page today, this is what you'll find. Sorry, the page that you're looking for isn't here, because they are starting to remove that content from the internet. Now, in the meantime, I'm really happy to say that a number of mainstream news articles reporting that Apple has filed a legal complaint with the UK's Investigatory Powers Tribunal to challenge the British regime's order that it must forcibly break the encryption of iCloud data. Now, the Financial Times is the outlet we've chosen here because they broke the story in the first place. But if you remember, Apple has now removed advanced data protection facility from British customers so that it doesn't have to comply, or at least they think that means that it doesn't have to comply with the demand to create a backdoor on their encryption algorithms. The Investigatory Powers Tribunal is an independent judicial body, and it's supposed to oversee legal complaints against potential unlawful actions by public authorities or by the UK intelligence services. And the FT reports that should the case be heard, that the case should be heard as soon as this month, although it's unclear whether there'll be any public disclosure of the hearing. Well, they're suggesting it's unclear that there would be a public disclosure, but I'm going to suggest that it's very clear that there'll be no public disclosure of the hearing. And that's because the only reason we know about this story at all is because it was leaked to the press in the first place. And since the investigatory powers legislation demands total secrecy over these issues, we're not going to get any announcement from the government, and probably not from the tribunal itself. Now, although Apple has removed advanced data protection from British customers, the British government is still claiming that Apple needs to comply with the court order and provide a backdoor. So therefore, that's still a risk as far as people in other jurisdictions are concerned. As we reported last week, Tulsi Gabbard is now seeking clarity on whether or not Britain's actions are a breach of the Cloud Act, which is a treaty with the US. And she, as we mentioned last week, she wrote to two US Congress people saying, "My lawyers are working to provide a legal opinion on the implications of the reported UK demands against Apple and the bilateral Cloud Act agreement." So, at the heart of this is the provision in the Investigatory Powers Amendment Act of last year of these so-called technical capability notices. Now, these compel companies to build and or maintain technical capabilities to respond to what the government calls lawful requests for data under the Investigatory Powers Act. And as I say, the issuing of these notices is supposed to remain secret. But as this case demonstrates, good luck with that, because these companies aren't going to continue to accept this kind of behavior, it seems, in many cases. And I just want to remind everyone of one other disgusting aspect of all this. The reason the government wants backdoor access is that otherwise they would have to get a court order to require someone suspected of a crime to give up the keys to their encrypted data, and they'd have to do that on an individual basis. And now the penalty for not giving up keys to encrypted data at the moment is a maximum 2 years in prison if I were to be required to do this. For example, most offences that they're trying to use the encrypted data, as prosecution evidence for example, child pornography would have a penalty which is much greater than the 2 years in prison that you get for not giving up the keys. So if you're genuinely innocent or you have some integrity, the 2 years penalty looks pretty grim. But if you're actually guilty of something, it's a cheap way or a short way to serve your time.
Yep.
So it's great for the pedophile, but it's not so great for the journalist or the political activist.
Interesting. Yeah, it's really incentivizing the wrong behavior. So
Absolutely, absolutely. I regret to say Mark has not managed to make it back with us at this point. So let's see what is next, Macron.
And by the way, good to see Tulsi Gabbard weighing in on that important issue.
Yes.
Obviously we're very critical of her appointment for other reasons, but we applaud any positive moves that any of these officials make. So credit where credit's due.
Yes. Okay. Mark, are you with us again?
I can hear you, but I can't see you, believe it or not.
Well, okay. Well,
no, we're good. We're good. Okay,
we're
I got
good.
it.
Okay, right. Well, let's come to your segment on Bilderberg then.
Okay. That's fine. We'll have to have you move the slides on your end. Just
That's
a
fine.
quick note. Yeah. I was looking for Bilderberg information about where they're going to meet, trying to confirm it for this coming late May, early June. I wasn't successful yet, but I ran across something very interesting here. The School for Foreign Studies, the Georgetown School of International Affairs, the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs is the associated newspaper with the School for Foreign Service. That's actually what it's called, the School for Foreign Service, the Edmund A. Walsh School for Foreign Service. This is the main school through which the U.S. Diplomatic Corps is trained to be our ambassadors. And many of those people have been Council on Foreign Relations members who, of course, are plugged in many years, many of the time to Bilderberg. And they have joined other think tanks and been associated with other think tanks that are part of the Bilderberg universe. And so it's very significant that the School for Foreign Studies would publish an article on Bilderberg at all, let alone an article that's rather critical or at least nominally critical of the organization. That's kind of the news here. Now we'll take a look at the author real quick. And this is Lucas Cantor. He wrote the article, and then the School for Foreign Service published it at Georgetown, which is on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. He's a Czech researcher and academic expert, they say, on the Bilderberg meetings, formerly with the Faculty of Social Sciences at Charles University in Prague, where he published 2 articles on Bilderberg. Cantor also served at the press department of the Czech government, so he's been inside the civic body there and has worked in journalism and public relations. Now, it's notable that I've been aware for actually a few years now that there's been these academic studies on Bilderberg. Most of them kind of dismissed Bilderberg's significance. They didn't go very deeply into that significance. And I put them aside, not really thinking much of them. They were kind of dry in terms of their writing style. But when I saw that essay being published by that School for Foreign Service, that really caught my eye. And it's actually kind of an interview with Lucas Cantor based on his writings is what it actually is. And this is what Lucas had to say. This is among 2 things that I quoted him on. For one thing, he said, I do not want to demonize Bilderberg as many critics do, but I also do not want to whitewash it as some advocates tend to do. Both of these extremes are misleading, and we need to find a balanced position in between, although it's not easy. And he went on to say, there are legitimate concerns each time politicians and business people meet behind closed doors. Elites have disproportionate power. Fraternizations, including those at Bilderberg, enhance that power. So he's knocking on the door of getting this thing right. And here we have an elitist school through which Bilderberg members and attendees have passed through to get their education. And that school is publishing this article, again, that's a little bit critical of Bilderberg. And it's either a limited hangout to try and create some damage control for Bilderberg, because more and more publications are actually starting to talk about Bilderberg. Time magazine has had some significant articles, which is pretty unprecedented in recent years. And CBS is paying more attention, and so on down the line. Anyway, I have some articles on the UK Column website that I'll mention, and I believe I really get to the core of what Bilderberg is all about. above and beyond what Lewis Cantor was putting down in his academic papers, which he was interviewed for at that website. And I have two of them. This one is Bilderberg Beyond the Meetings Part 2, Secretive Gatherings, a collusive conduit for AI, big media marriage. And that article talks about how the artificial intelligence people, such as Sam Altman in particular, are aligning themselves with big media. And my approach has been to get beyond the meetings, not only look at those all-important annual meetings, but look at the fallout and the long-term plans and programs and ramifications of Bilderberg. And that goes much further in explaining what they're about and getting at their significance beyond what Mr. Cantor was willing to reveal, although he did a pretty good job insofar as what they published. So readers and viewers can check out those two articles I put on your website. And I believe that really cuts to the core of what modern day Bilderberg is all about. And of course, I'll be looking more for where they'll be meeting, because even though I'm looking beyond the meetings, those meetings are still very important. I believe Patrick had heard they might meet in Stockholm, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure that's 100% true, but we'll be looking at that and trying to cover that as best we can. So we'll leave it at that for now.
Yes, Mark, a member of our research cohort saying Stockholm, Sweden he believes that, and he's in Sweden, he believes that that's going to be the location, and that also elevates the Wallenberg family to the top steering committee level. That's the Wallenbergs of Ericsson Communications, Saab, and all of the defense contractors in Sweden as well. So interesting if that's the case. More power shifting up towards Scandinavia, a little bit of an interesting shift in power in Europe.
We shouldn't forget that Jens Stoltenberg, I appreciate he's not from Sweden, but nonetheless Scandinavian, and he is on the steering committee now.
No, he's the new
chairman, in fact.
Yeah, he's the new boss, Bilderberg. So yeah, that's incredibly interesting. So Mark, this could be an interesting turn for Bilderberg this year.
Mark, briefly.
Let me mention real briefly that you jarred my memory, Patrick. Cantor did put in his interview with the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown that he did confirm that Ursula von der Leyen got to where she was largely because of Bilderberg, and as well as Bill Clinton on our side of the pond. So he did go that far. And it's just amazing that School of Foreign Service, again, where CFR, big think tankers, and Bilderbergers themselves have been trained, it's amazing that they even published that article. So it's good news in that sense, though it may be limited hangout for damage control, but we'll see.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, let's move back to the war policy then, and Macron.
Well, this video, as propaganda videos go, Mike, this is just really something else. So Emmanuel Macron is in full war mode. Take a look at this video that he has unleashed this week.
La guerre en Ukraine dure maintenant depuis plus de 3 ans. Nous avons, dès le premier jour, décidé de soutenir l'Ukraine et de sanctionner la Russie. Et nous avons bien fait. Car c'est non seulement le peuple ukrainien qui lutte avec courage pour sa liberté, mais c'est aussi notre sécurité qui est menacée. En effet, si un pays peut envahir impunément son voisin en Europe, alors personne ne peut plus être sûr de rien. Et c'est la loi du plus fort qui s'applique, et la paix ne peut plus être garantie sur notre continent même. L'histoire nous l'a enseigné. Au-delà de l'Ukraine, la menace russe est là et touche les pays d'Europe, nous touche. La Russie a déjà fait du conflit ukrainien un conflit mondial. Elle a mobilisé sur notre continent des soldats nord-coréens, des équipements iraniens, tout en aidant ces pays à s'armer davantage. La Russie du président Poutine viole nos frontières pour assassiner des opposants, manipule les élections en Roumanie, en Moldavie. Elle organise des attaques numériques contre nos hôpitaux pour en bloquer le fonctionnement. La Russie tente de manipuler nos opinions avec des mensonges diffusés sur les réseaux sociaux. Et au fond, elle teste nos limites. Elle le fait dans les airs, en mer, dans l'espace et derrière nos écrans. Cette agressivité ne semble pas connaître de frontières. Et la Russie, dans le même temps, continue de se réarmer, dépensant plus de 40% de son budget à cette fin. D'ici 2030, elle prévoit d'encore accroître son armée, d'avoir 300 000 soldats supplémentaires, 3 000 chars, 300 avions de chasse de plus. Qui peut donc croire, dans ce contexte, que la Russie d'aujourd'hui s'arrêtera à l'Ukraine. La Russie est devenue, au moment où je vous parle et pour les années à venir, une menace pour la France et pour l'Europe. Je le regrette très profondément. Et je suis convaincu qu'à long terme, la paix se fera sur notre continent avec une Russie redevenue apaisée et pacifique. Mais la situation que je vous décris est celle-là et nous devons faire avec.
And for anybody just listening to that, if you want to come and look at the video afterwards, the subtitles are there in English, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you break this down? He told so many lies during this. So this guy is in full propaganda mode. Let's bring this up on stage here. We're calling this the Euro Warhawks. We showed you the Euro Coven earlier. You could say that Macron is part of that coven in a way, if you know what I mean. But nonetheless, so look at this. Let's just break down some of these lies. So the propaganda and lies are replete throughout everything that he said. Number one, if one country can invade its neighbor, we can't be sure of anything. So this is part of the big lie, Mike, that Ukraine is in the heart of Europe. How many times do you hear Piers Morgan say this? They all say it. No. Ukraine is not in the heart of Europe. It's on the fringe of Eastern Europe, on the Caucasus and Eurasian borderlands. That's what Ukraine means, by the way, means borderlands in Russia. So, and he's basically saying Russia, because they've had this dispute over the Donbass, that the entirety of Europe is in danger. Total propaganda. Secondly, saying it's the law of the strongest that applies. Well, excuse me very much, but who occupies almost every single European country militarily? Is it not the United States of America? Did not the law of the strongest apply after World War II? Is that not the basis of the entire peace dividend? I mean, it's just unbelievable, but it goes on. It gets better. Russia has globalized the Ukraine war with North Korean troops and Iranian equipment on our continent. First of all, there is no evidence of these North Korean troops. It's a total lie. It's a trope that's been used in Western media just to rile people up, to make it seem like it's globalized. So here you see the self-licking ice cream cone of circular propaganda. Iranian equipment on our continent. Again, Ukraine, the heart of Europe. There's Iranian equipment. There's equipment from 150 different countries right now in any different.
How much Russian equipment is Ukraine using?
How much? No, there's plenty of Russian equipment on European soil as well. So, I mean, exactly. And how much American equipment is there on European soil? So it's just so ridiculous. But anyway, here we go. President Putin manipulates our elections in Romania. Excuse me, but this is just a patent lie. It was the EU that canceled elections, and the democratically elected frontrunner, Georgiou, he basically got shafted. Kalin got shafted by the EU at the behest of the U.S. State Department. Okay, so let's just get that clear. A total lie. Number 5, Putin organized digital attacks on our hospitals. There's no evidence that this ever happened. This is a complete lie. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the president of France talking here to his country. Russia manipulating our opinion on social media. I don't really know where to start, but I think J.D. Vance sort of set Europe straight during the Munich Security Conference on that very point here. But I saved the best for last, Mike, because it's always good to fact check the president of a UN Security Council member here. Russia spends 40% of its budget on military. Now, I thought, wow, that's quite a high number. Let's take a look at that for a minute. Let's just go straight here. This is the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, and this ranks countries here. I've got it sorted for, let me see, total spending. Let's take a closer look at that. Of course, there's the United States, upwards of $1 trillion there, 916 billion. Second, China, a far second at 296 billion. Russia, just over 100 billion, Mike. Not bad for the largest landmass on the planet with all those borders to defend. But look at the GDP ratio there. Russia's spending 5.9% of its GDP on defense. So how did he get this figure that they spend 40% of all their money on military there? Check that out. 5%, 5.9% of GDP. Let's just take a closer look here. By comparison, look at this. Ukraine spends 37% of its GDP
That's
on
closer to the 40% number, isn't it?
That's closer to the 40%. But what does that tell you? They're losing the war and they're still spending 37%. They're losing to Russia, who's only spending 5.9%, plus all of their Asian borders and so forth. But it gets better. Let's just take a look here. And another comparable expenditure here. Let's just talk about the U.S. for a minute here. There's the U.S. That's the total outlay of the U.S. budget, Mike, from last year. Okay, this is according to the Department of the Treasury, U.S. Treasury Department, $6.7 trillion, right? But that's not their budget, is it, Mike? This is their budget. It's $4.9 trillion. What does that mean? That means the United States has a deficit spend of $1.8 trillion per year on, year out, just about $2 trillion a year. That's how the United States is able to have a military budget that is so bloated, okay? And so let's look at percentages, though, because Macron basically is talking about percentages here. So let's just take a look at that. So basically, U.S. total budget, $4.9 trillion. That's for the government, not counting the deficit overrun there. Military defense, actual budget, Mike, is $1.2 trillion. That's the actual number. That's 24% of the U.S. total budget is on military. Let's compare that to Russia. Total Russian state budget, $340 billion. Military defense, $100 billion, 29%. Okay, so where's Macron getting these figures? That's what we're trying to figure out. But look at this. I just do a little bit of research, and this is Andrew Cockburn from the Quincy Institute, getting the defense budget right. The real grand total for the U.S. defense budget, $1.4 trillion per year. That includes overruns, overseas commitments, and active theaters and so forth, plus Homeland Security, that's defense related, $1.4 trillion, okay? And they're screaming about Russia, who spends $100 billion, which I think isn't a whole lot more than what France spends. And France will have trouble even fielding 10,000 troops at a pinch. Unbelievable.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Patrick. Mark, let's come back to you then. And well, a little bit on Trump. And the question, I mean, the European Union is very famous for taking antitrust prosecutions against various companies like Microsoft and Google and so on. But what is Trump doing with Google?
Well, that's actually an open question, and this this first slide asks some good questions. Will Trump go after Google? A curiously named publication called The Jacobin asked back on the 15th of January before he was inaugurated. Much more recently, the New York Post, Google met with Trump's DOJ in effort to avoid what they're calling a historic breakup of the search giant. And what's at stake here is just what kind of Republican is Donald Trump? Is he the modern, orthodox, pro-capitalist at any cost, all that counts is big business? Is he that kind of Republican? Or is he really the populist in capitalist clothing that he kind of claims to be? And in that way, he's kind of changed the Republican Party to acting more like the old school Democrats, when the old school Democrats actually stood up for the working man, the working class, the middle class. Trump has been trying to reshape the Republican Party in that manner. So will the real Donald Trump stand up? This is going to be a real litmus test for what kind of President Trump really is, what kind of leader, what kind of philosophy he really has. And we'll move on from there. I'm going back in time a little bit now. The U.S. proposes breakup of Google to fix the search monopoly. New York Times, 3rd of December, late last year. In a landmark antitrust case, the government asked a judge to force Google to sell its popular Chrome browser, which many analysts see as very significant if that were to happen. And then we'll go from there and kind of comb through this. Now, Ken Paxton, the Attorney General here in Texas, I asked the question, are today's Republicans going populist? He seems to be. And back in August of last year, Paxton delivered a major win against Google's internet search monopoly and anti-competitive business practices. And this was part of a federal suit, the U.S. District Court for Washington, D.C., and they determined that Google's anti-competitive and monopolistic operations violated the federal Sherman Act, an act against trusts. And then from there, the ruling on Meta was also significant. This Texas settlement, said Mr. Paxton, is the largest ever obtained from an action brought by a single state. Further, this is the largest privacy settlement an attorney general has ever obtained, dwarfing the $390 million settlement a group of 40 states obtained in late 2022 from Google. And that had to do with Meta, a lawsuit brought and first settlement obtained under Texas Capture or Use of Biometric Identifier Act, and so on and so forth. It has to do with privacy rights of Texans. Also, at 30 July last year, Attorney General Ken Paxton secured that $1.4 billion settlement with Meta, which owns Facebook, over its unauthorized capture of personal biometric data in the largest settlement ever obtained from an action brought by a single state, as noted. And anyway, that pretty much outlines it. So this is it's an interesting movement on the part of the Republican Party to kind of take the stance that the old guard Democrats used to take and the paleo conservative, the old guard Republicans used to take, to be antitrust and to go after large trusts and things like that, to be trust busters. In more modern times, the Reagan Republicans, of course, have shied away from that. So this is really going to be a test in what Donald Trump does to see which way the Republican Party is going to go, to see which way the White House is going to go. And I believe it would show that Trump is more sincere toward helping the middle class and getting more economic democracy, if you will, in the country, if he's willing to take on Google and bust up these trusts. Of course, one of the risks is like what happened with Standard Oil. They broke it up into smaller pieces, but it became more of an oligopoly and kind of a group of powerful companies that operated more or less like a cartel. So it's going to be it'll have to be done very carefully to be effective. And so there's a lot at stake here. We'll have to keep an eye on Donald Trump to see which way he goes, but it'll be very telling about what he's really about.
Thank you, Mark. We're just going to end the program here with an announcement from Ofcom. This was pushed out on the 3rd of March, but they were informing everybody of this by email earlier today. This is the enforcement program to monitor compliance with the illegal content risk assessment duties and record keeping duties. Now, I just wanted to bring this again to everybody's attention. We mentioned it before, but they have now launched a program to actually enforce this. So if you basically, okay, on one hand, it's dealing with, just as Mark was talking about, the big search monopolies and how they manage content on the search engines. But this also applies to anybody that's running an internet forum, for example, what they describe as a user-to-user service. And in fact, this doesn't just apply to the largest user-to-user services like X or Meta, but this also applies to absolutely the smallest forums, special interest forums and so on. UK Column absolutely falls under this umbrella as well. And the same administrative burden is being placed on voluntary organizations as is being placed on multi-billion dollar organizations like X and Meta. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this develops, but we just wanted to bring that, remind everybody of this, because if you are running a smaller forum, you do need to pay attention to this. They clearly are intending to be litigious with it in the not too distant future. But that's that for now. We need to leave the UK column there for today. I'm going to say thank you very much to Patrick and to Mark for today, and for everybody that's watched. If you're a UK column member, stick around for some extra. Lots to talk about today. And if you're not a member and would like to watch extra, please consider joining as a member, and then you can. We will see you later. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.